that are with us tonight. Returning guest, returning champion. Say, who's the champion? I guess Paul has been on more than anybody. Paul Santa Cruz, who is an airline employee in real life, and Diane Hansen, who's a flight attendant in real life. And with me, of course, along with them are Dieter Staudinger, our chief cook and bottle washer. No, he's our IT chief and our ace wingman. And then, of course, Eric, Captain Chop Liver, and Larson. You got all these Danes running around the place up here. So welcome back. Once again, the first thing we'll do is welcome you if you're afraid to fly, or if you know somebody who's afraid to fly, which represents, I always say, give me a group of 3 people, and 2 of them will either be afraid to fly or they'll know somebody who's afraid to fly. And that's been consistent over the last 30 years that I've been doing this. Anyway, it's for that, or people who just like to listen to us talk about airplanes and the kind of the behind the scenes in the airlines. And then the next thing we like to do is to welcome you to join our Facebook group called Birds of a Feather, Facebook group Birds of a Feather. And that is 600 plus people who have joined so far, who share your fear or share their concerns about wanting to get over their fear, or somebody getting over their fear. It's a great resource. You can meet other people in there. We've had some great networks form, and we jump in there and answer questions ourselves. And coming up in the future, we're going to have something to offer people in the Facebook group itself in the way of coaching. So get over there now if you haven't been. Introduce yourself and leave a comment. Tonight we're going to relaunch our poll, our survey about when will you fly again. Tonight, the theme is really about the coronavirus, COVID-19, because it's obviously captured the news. In particular, if you live in Arizona or California, Arizona like we do, or California or Texas and Florida, you've been in the news a lot, and you probably know that. It's really getting dicey down here in Arizona because of the expansion of the number of people there. And I just was listening today. I think if it all turned a corner today, it would be 4 weeks before we'd start to see any of the real reductions in the number of people out there. So it is serious. If you're like me, you can't help but hear crazy things in the news. Palm Beach, Florida, I think, is the one that pops into my mind. It was a city council meeting in which they voted to make it mandatory to wear your mask, and there were people actually testifying there that said, God's going to get you, and you can't do this to me, and you're taking away one of our natural resources, breathing and all that. I mean, it was just insane. And we'll share a little bit of the insanity perhaps from Paul, and in the airline industry as well, from Paul and Diane here. There they are, coming up number 2 there. You know what? I want to just ask everybody right now, anybody who's listening right now, or if you hit the replay and when you hear this, just if it weren't for your fear of flying and anything else, it was just for the COVID-19, no big poll or anything like that, just put yes or no in the comments there. Would you fly right now if everything else were not an issue? Okay. No safety issues, no fear of flying or anything like that. If it's just the COVID-19, would you basically feel safe in flying? And like I said, Diane and Paul are going to tell us what the reality is up there. And Aviation News Roundup, we're going to give you some homework in that area tonight. We posed a question: will the pilots be rusty when they come back if you're getting furloughed? And there's a reduction in the number of pilots out there now. Some of the airlines are cutting back. And will it be safe to trust pilots after time off with no flying there? And we're going to refer you to Captain Eric's blog post. There is a link there will be a link in the notes, the show notes here. So anyway, okay. So let's just open it up here, and we'll talk about what's going on right now. So I think Diane just flew today, and Paul's at duty there. I hope we're not getting you in trouble. Nobody's watching you get you fired, are they? Paul?
No, we're good. And if I have to break away, if somebody comes up, I'll break away. So we're good.
Okay, good. So Diane, you just flew to get today for the first time, right? In 3 months?
Today was my first flight back after being on leave for 3 months. My previous last trip was March the 31st. So it was really exciting. I missed it a lot. And to talk about like what Eric's blog post about being rusty, I worried, am I going to remember all of the things I'm supposed to do? And I did. It's like riding a bike. You just get back on the plane and everything just washes all over you. So that was not a concern at all. As Paul had his mask on and I had my mask on, that's one of the things, obviously, to get into Sky Harbor, you have to have your mask on, and all of our passengers have to have their masks on. And
are you required to wear it in flight?
Yes.
Okay. And so for you, this was the first time, right? Did you, because you didn't have to do that when you took your leave of absence, did you?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Up until then, we were not required to wear a mask. We are now.
Okay.
We're now.
So today it was with. So what did you notice? Did you notice anything just about wearing the mask for the whole flight?
For me personally,
yeah.
I had it on earlier, but I did wind up having to lower it a little bit in order to do my announcements, in order to make it clear on the PA system. That's the only time I even brought my mask down. So that wasn't difficult. As far as the crew members, no, that wasn't hard at all.
Okay. And do the pilots wear their masks?
Yes, they do, obviously. When the flight deck door is closed, I have no idea. But, but when it's open and have their masks on as well. Yes, absolutely.
So even when they're interacting with you, they wear masks.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because there were some articles out there, and some of them, said that, well, the pilots weren't wearing their mask and all that. So there, and of course those things are going to come out there. So
go
ahead.
As I said the last time I was on a couple of weeks ago, I can only speak to my airline. So yeah, what everybody else is doing, I can't be real clear on that.
So you're flying RJs for people out there with airplanes that usually have 3 on one side, 2 on the other in the coach section?
No, we've got 2 and 2. The aircraft 2 and 2, and then the aircraft I was flying today, a lot of them have been refitted so that we have only 65 passengers. We have 9 in first class, and that 9 in first class is 3 rows of 2 and 1, and the rest of the aircraft is 2 and 2. So
when you say refitted, that means that they actually took the 3 out and put 2 in place?
Well, no, they didn't do that.
No, okay.
We used to have 70. A lot of
them. Yeah, they're just a smaller version.
And same exact plane, but what they did, they took some rows of main cabin out to make the first class 1 more row, and they gave us a little bit more storage space in the galley. They gave us 1 wall of Atlases, which are storage areas, and another couple of carts. So basically it's the same exact aircraft, but they just rearranged the interior so that there's more first class seats and a little bit more space for us in the galley.
Okay, I got that part. I was misunderstanding that in the coach section, it's just 2 and 2.
Yes, 2 and 2.
Okay, so it's like a 700 or something instead of a 900.
It's a 700. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Do they? 200, except there's just no first class in a 200.
So I heard some of the mainline airplanes, I think in America, and they used to be at least, they were blocking the row across from the flight attendants. Do they do that for you or? No.
The gate agents, the customer service agents are wonderful, and they have tried to, for example, in the last row right next to me, if I'm the aft flight attendant, try to block that off, and then also in first class to try to make sure that the 2 aisle seats, at least the 1 aisle seat rather, is blocked so that the forward flight attendant doesn't have anybody right there. That was the case over to California earlier today. On the way back, I did have passengers in the row right next to me. Now, when they rearranged the seating, they moved the last row forward a little bit, so I'm not completely surrounded by passengers. So that makes that better. Yeah.
Okay.
But starting tomorrow, as Paul said, when we go back to full capacity, they're not going to be blocking those rows off probably.
Well, he said that before anybody came on. So when he says that, we'll notice
Wait,
it.
yeah,
So,
That's okay.
so when,
they try to do that for us. They try to do that for us, but
Exactly.
okay. So did you, anything out of the ordinary, any discipline problems or anybody bitching about wearing their mask or anything?
not on the way over. On the way back, we had one passenger who was not compliant, and the forward flight attendant spoke to this individual, I think she said 3 different times, to try to explain to him about wearing his mask, and he refused. And so one of the passengers who was sitting directly in front of him came back and spoke to me. And so because we tried to, I think as I explained before a couple of weeks ago, we try to work together. So she had tried and was unsuccessful. And so she called on me. And so when I went up and explained to him that he needed to wear his mask, and if he did not, he risked not being allowed to fly on our airline anymore.
Okay. So
he finally heard that part. He did put his mask on.
okay. So he boarded correctly with the mask on and everything, but when he took his seat, he took it off. Yeah. And I have to say that I would have been tempted. Well, we did when we flew, Paul, right? You know, in the beginning of the month, we did that.
Yeah.
And since that time, I had a scare because I ended up taking a COVID-19 test, and I got a little bit more religion after I did that. So I'll talk about that later. So
the people take their masks off or down when they're drinking or eating something, but they need to be on all the time.
Right, and we did too, but we were talking and stuff, so we pulled ours down before that. But that was the difference in what was going on 3 weeks ago too.
I would have spoken if it were now. I would have spoken to you.
Yeah, there you go.
Walking up and down the aisle, yeah.
Yeah. That was my point there. So anyway,
are you doing any service, Diane? Do you do any service?
None. We don't brew coffee. We don't get the carts out. There are absolutely no snacks on board the plane. There are still soft drinks, orange juice, and water, and that's basically for anybody who puts in a special request. We make an announcement with regard to the fact there's no service. In first class, if they request something, then the forward flight attendant will serve first class beverage. But the way we serve beverages is even different too. So
Diane,
there's no ice unless someone asks for ice.
You're there for what you were hired for, safety and emergencies.
Yeah.
So that was actually a question, Diane, that's here in the chat. Are there any other big changes, surprises that you can tell us, I guess, when we get to the airplane or when we get even to the airport? So anything that, and then Paul, the question is to you as well. Just kind of like, what is it like to get to an airport in, Phoenix, in, the end of June? So people are definitely interested.
When I got there, it was pretty busy. And the only reason is there's basically 2 blocks of time during the day when there's a lot of departures and arrivals. And so my plane left at mid-morning this morning when there are a lot of planes leaving. When I got back to Phoenix and finally deplaned and got out, the airport was at about 5 o'clock was essentially empty. Other than that, as far as the passengers coming onto the plane, like I said a couple of weeks ago, bring your own food and beverages. I had a passenger ask me this afternoon, you're not selling or giving out anything? And I said, no, I'm sorry. And he was not happy. So that's what now.
Okay, so the bank system, Paul can address that too. But I mean, like I remember back in 40 years ago, 30 years ago when I started, people may not realize that, but the airlines, you can go to the airlines in between banks, and a bank is like a rush hour. If there's 2 rush hours in the city of Phoenix, one, from 6 to 9 and one from 4 to 6 to 4 to 7, I guess, in the evening, where the highways are clogged. In the airlines, at any given major airport, there used to be like up to a dozen banks every day. So you'd go to the airport, and if you're in the middle of a bank, it'd be completely packed. You come back in 45 minutes, and it's like a ghost town there. And now what I'm understanding is, for at least your experience, there's just 2 banks for your airline, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Paul, is that pretty much the same for the majors too?
Yeah, and it's really different. I'll give you an idea.
Yeah.
Every night I get somebody that's asking for a cup of coffee. You can't get a cup of coffee in this airport if you're on a red-eye flight going to Miami or to Philadelphia, and I don't even know if they're going to get it on the plane. But the gift shop's open from 9 till 9:30 to 10:30, just so people can get food. So to give you an idea, when I come in at 3:30, I'll go straight and I'll work a flight. I work like San Antonio today. So I'll go and work a flight because we're so short on people, on the staffing on that group of bank of flights that are, let's say, 10, 20 flights that are all leaving between 3:30 and 4 o'clock or 4:30, so to speak. So everyone's lined up at Wendy's, everyone's lined up at McDonald's. And it's the craziest thing. When you get done with the flight in a half an hour, everything in this airport is closed. There could be 400 people all going out at one time on 2 concourses. And then after that flight leaves, I can't even get in the gift shops. They're all shut. They're all shut down until
like the Wendy's, Paul, then does that mean that they literally just open it for a couple hours, or is it open from time in the morning until after the last flight of the day? But then
they only stay open till 7 o'clock. So anybody on a red-eye flight pretty much is not going to get anything to eat in this airport, because right now, hopefully tomorrow we'll start, beefing up more flights and capacity. I think we're adding another 40 or 50 more flights. Then hopefully a lot of the shops will open up, gift shops or whatever, where people can get something to eat. Because the biggest thing now is we have one gift shop in this whole airport, and that is the only place. And we've gone from having 24-hour service in this airport to pretty much everything's done by our last flight is at 8:30. We keep one gift shop open for the Los Angeles flight at 8:26, and then it's over. And then it's just about
and
flights.
Is that gift shop inside or beyond security, or is it outside? Yeah,
it's on beyond security, and they will usually go on that concourse, and we'll open it up. We'll make an announcement that they can get food or snacks there.
Okay.
But again, it's not a restaurant type setting, so it's really better to just bring your own food, because you're just going to get a packaged sandwich, and that's about it.
Okay. So if you were flying out of any airport, not just Phoenix, it might be worth your time, if you had a late night flight for sure, or an early morning flight, to call the airport and see if there is a gift shop or something like that, wouldn't it? Or,
absolutely.
The safest plan is to bring your own food, but
because there's just not the, like I said, there's only 3 or 4 flights. We do 3 flights tonight, and that's it. So there just isn't the amount of staffing to pay to have people there. When the bookings come up starting tomorrow, and they will, because people are definitely flying. I mean, the flights are full. I did one flight, maybe it holds 120. We did 114. So, I mean, 10 seats difference. And the biggest thing here, going on that subject, is social distancing ends tomorrow, basically, as far as we're not going to be able to social distance the passengers when we have a full flight.
Okay.
So, it's important to wear a mask. And if you don't have a mask, my airline does provide them. You can get them at the gates. You can get them where I work at the passenger assistance counter. You can get them at the ticket counter. And then we've also, with situation with the COVID, we've also gone where we ask the COVID questions. If you're flying in certain cities of high markets, then they have to quarantine. For example, if you're going to New York, you have to fill out a paper and quarantine for 14 days. If you're traveling to New York and out of certain cities, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and that is if you're locally boarding out of here.
Okay, so if you're if you're from New York going back to New York, the rules are different.
I believe so, yeah. But if you're going from Los Angeles, because it's a high area, target area, and you're going to New York, then you have to quarantine. If you're coming from all these other cities,
and they're gonna be appraised of that when they land somewhere, in the arriving gate, or
we give them the paperwork before they go there, and then
you do. Okay, so it's like the old days in customs. You get it on board the airplane. Okay,
and then they get it again when they come into New York.
Okay.
So the rule of thumb is if they live in New York, then they need to quarantine for 14 days, or if they're visiting, they have to quarantine for 14 days. because
Okay.
you're coming from a high area. For example, at this point, Phoenix is a high area, Arizona is a high area. So, you know, Los Angeles, a high area, San Francisco is a high area. So that's part that we're doing, as well as everyone wears masks at all times in the airport. And even with my airline, we wear them at all times. Even in, it used to be if you were outside of the 6 feet distancing, but now it's at all times. You know, they have to be worn. And then when you come into the airport, you're going to see a lot of little spots everywhere where even when you're going through the TSA, where they want you to line up, it's 6 feet apart from each one. And they kind of have to police that yourself. But if you see the guy that's 3 feet away from you, then you can always move back so that, you know, you can anticipate 6 feet apart. So that's a big thing all through the airport. You'll see blue markers and everything's marked, from the TSA to the gift shops marked. It's just like the grocery stores and anywhere else. The masks are worn. We provide the mask. If you want to bring your own mask, you can wear your own mask. You can wear your own facial covering. But yeah, it's mandatory. I've seen people taken off planes several times here that refuse to wear masks. Then they're not going to be able to fly on this airline.
So if you want to get your name in the USA Today, the way to do it is to just come and be obnoxious and refuse.
Yeah, we had one that 27 people missed a flight that was connecting, because everything now goes through the hubs. The hub and spoke system is back. So if you're going to certain cities, you're going to go through Charlotte, Miami, or Philadelphia now on this night flight to get to Miami. And a lot of people say, well, why do I have to go there to get to Dallas? Because we don't have a night flight to Dallas at this point. But starting tomorrow, we will have more flights to Dallas. I was looking at it. I think we have 1 flight a day to Vegas. We're going to go up to 2 flights, which is really going to be good because, as I said, people want to fly. So as the airline adds more flights, we'll be able to accommodate more people.
Way back in the early days of my career, we used to joke the hardest challenge for marketing was to convince somebody who wanted to go from Denver to New York to convince that person the shortest distance was through Dallas, Fort Worth.
Exactly.
Because it was hub and spoke, and it was a purely marketing and for efficiency. And Southwest has been an airline. They were the only airline that did not do that. They were a point-to-point airline, and still to some degree, that's how they operate. It's a little bit different challenge for them.
So before we move on to that, on from that topic there, Paul, that was exactly some of the questions that I've been getting. How is it in terms of policing some of these rules or enforcing them, or having to deal with different people having, you know, all sorts of attitudes about it? And
I think for the most part, I think the first time that I boarded a flight, I felt like I was in a hospital because there's so many people that are boarding, and they're taking their own boarding passes when they go through. Now we don't touch them, so they take their phone, they scan it, they take their boarding pass, they scan it. It's you know, it's a lot different. It's a lot through the airport. That's another thing which I think is really great. The city of Phoenix has put hand sanitizers everywhere. So, I mean, you can't hand sanitize enough, you know, and touch points in that. But yeah, it's completely different, and it's a whole different, you know, it's a whole different way. But this is the way when you travel now. You know, if you're bringing hand sanitizer, you can't have enough, you know. And so
we have we have a lot of people who are really, even if they did that before, very conscientious and wiping down their seats and that sort of thing. But just to reassure all the people who should be out there flying, the crews come on before the flight departs at the turns when we went to California and back, and they are cleaning those planes. They're cleaner than I've ever seen them. They are really marvelous. And I am just been very, very impressed with the manner in which not only all of the passengers are treating their own personal space, but certainly the airline themselves and how they're maintaining the airplanes. One thing I wanted to add, talk about, that's kind of fun for us as flight attendants. One of the things we are always dealing with is when the plane lands and is taxiing to the gate, you know, people start unbuckling their seatbelts and getting up. Like, that's really going to make a difference, right? When as far as they're getting off. I've had passengers who were almost barely to the gate in the jet bridge and has been kind of barreling to the front trying to get off. And I looked at her, I said, "Ma'am, the jet bridge isn't even attached yet." But now, because of the social distancing, part of the announcement that we give is that we are going to be deplaning with that in mind. And so everybody deplanes from the front to the rear of our aircraft, and not standing up and getting your bags until the row in front of you has cleared the aisle. And it's like a miracle. It's just everybody except one. There was one group in the very back of the plane coming back from California. Everybody is very good about that. And a couple people stood up ahead of time, and I was in the aisle walking forward, and I said, "Please, if you would just remain seated until the row in front of you." And everybody was wonderful. They just sat back down. They said, "I am so sorry." They just left in the most orderly fashion. It was a revelation for me in a year plus of flying. So that's just an interesting thing. And the other thing with regard to the airport, we were in California, Long Beach, and we had a long sit. We had about 2 hours in between flights, and going into that part of the terminal that serviced our airline, that place was just, there was nothing open. I think you could buy a bag of chips, but that was
Yeah.
it.
So
It's
in
not-
addition to social distancing, we're seeing some return of social grace, perhaps.
Yes.
Just a
we-
tiny bit. Yeah.
just-
Let me to you somewhat, Diane, but Paul first. So on boarding, when you and I flew,
Mhm.
Southwest amended their boarding thing so that we were actually, they let us stagger in there 6 feet apart, if I remember
Right.
So they weren't crammed up there. Is your airline doing that as well? So when people board, is it still the old thing? The gates are up and everybody, it's a mad dash, or
the gates are up, everybody's a mad dash. I wish I could say, but I think they're aware of it a little more. But everybody's a mad dash because it's a boarding process where we have half an hour to get them on. So how to get 129 people on, but I mean, we're conscious of it, and we try to to control it. As far as like the way it is now, I was going to say, I went to a car wash the other day, and they're even doing electrostatic at the car washes, if for an additional for the COVID. So as far as boarding announcements, we've got a really great announcement where it does say social distancing and the seats. We explain that to them up to this point. We also explain, what we're doing on the flights before they board and that. So starting tomorrow, it will be different.
Okay. And when we flew again, I recall, please, brain, do not fail me. I'll think of it. It had to do with boarding, and I can't remember. Oh, early boarding. I wanted to say we didn't have any problem. I requested that if we could board early for my 2 fearful flyers, and they let us do that. You guys got to greet the flight attendant, asked if we could meet the pilots, and they honored that. So, do you see? Is that still a possibility?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
that's what I thought.
I can see that. Yeah.
So if you're a fearful flyer and you're flying, don't hold back. Still ask if you can early board. So, and
it's the best thing to do, because when you do that, you make a human connection with that pilot. You feel safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, he's got an iPad. I got an iPad. Okay. Now we got something in common. Okay. So in my mind, it's saying, okay, I'm safe because he's just like me, he's he's not this person that I don't see behind the door that's flying.
Yeah.
So there's just a
what
human
I heard you say tonight, in terms of everything else being equal, there's never been a time to get a cleaner airplane, which we used to always joke about that. We used to say by the time the airplane comes in for overhaul, doing the complete makeover, we used to joke there's probably 1,000 pounds of dirt in the thing, but probably not anymore. It's probably a lot cleaner. So that's good news in the long run. And I have a hunch that that'll be one of the things that survives the times.
I hope so. That would be very nice. Yeah, for sure. As far as, as Paul said, we make lots of announcements with regard to not putting simple things, not putting things in the seat back pocket. That's always has been an element of surprise on what you're going to find in a seatback pocket sometimes.
Yeah, that's a legend among flight
It
attendants. Is
really is.
never reach into the back of the seat.
We have
pocket.
gloves for a reason.
Exactly.
So I mean that's part and parcel. The folks really should be confident in the fact that the planes are clean. As far as boarding and congestion, the flights today were not particularly congested, but one of the most common problems that we have, because we have a smaller aircraft and smaller overhead bins, people bring bags on that, and they say, well, it fit on the last flight, and the last flight was probably a Airbus or a 737, and we don't have bins that size. So just to make things less congested, just kind of plan things a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks to you again, Diane, and to you, Paul, for joining us tonight. Eric, how about a little teaser? You got your latest blog hot off the press. I'm going to have a link to it, so people need to read that as homework. And what could you tease us with about that?
Well, I was just thinking before Paul goes, now we have to have him on again next week so that we can find out what it's like when the bookings are unrestricted.
I was hoping I'd be on vacation because I'm going to be at the gates a lot, so I'll be able to give you updates. It's exciting, though.
As long as you can update us, that's okay. So
right.
I'm back on reserve on the weekend, so I'll probably be able to help.
Dieter will throw up my third blog in a day or two that I wrote about. I wrote about CD19 to start with. Then we wrote about airplane storage because I was just kind of interested in it. And so the third one is titled Pilot Storage. What do pilots do while they're essentially parked? And I said, well, 1% of them are murdered at home because people can't take that kind of pain. But for the survivors, the company has to have guys ready to go and gals. All the pilots have to be semi-ready so that as demand comes up and turns around, they can be current, get in the airplane and fly it from A to B. The training center isn't equipped to handle upgrades, new hires, everything else, and recurrent flying from the whole airline all at once. So by virtue of the Federal Aviation regulations and our own company op specs, which I mentioned, those are more restrictive rules than the Federal Aviation regulations. We have to have at least 3 takeoffs and landings every 90 days at a minimum. And so as we approach that point where we're about to expire on landings, we call it, they'll go to one of the training centers somewhere in the hub and get in the simulator for either 1 day or 2 days of the check airman. And they'll actually fly a pretty serious profile of practice rejected takeoffs, engine failures, single engine approaches, 2 engine approaches, just to get them super sharp so that when they get back in the airplane, not only are they legal, they're very sharp and they're ready to go from point A to point B. So even though all the flying staff is at home with their life at risk in a domestic situation, the company is calling them in on a regular interval to maintain landing currency so that the airline can fly when it's ready, rather than going up in the attic, seeing who's left and trying to put tens of thousands of people through simulators all at once, it's just not a physical possibility. You can't.
So this isn't, for everybody listening out there, this isn't anything new in terms of keeping a pilot qualified, because we've always had reserve pilots that don't necessarily fly as regular as people who are assigned a monthly schedule. However, the difference here, not unlike the COVID-19, is we don't want everybody building up in a lump, because as Eric alluded to, the training center can't handle keeping everybody or requalifying a whole bunch of people at once. So next week we'll talk about that. And Eric and I both happen to have a couple of mutual friends who have just upgraded onto newer and bigger airplanes. And one of the problems associated with that is when you are a newly qualified captain or first officer on a new type of airplane, even though you may have thousands of hours of flight time, it's a new experience in that airplane. So there are some rules that pertain to that, and what's compounding that a little bit is the fact that there aren't as many hours because they've suppressed that a little bit. So that provides some challenge with that. And Eric was sharing with me earlier, we'll share with you next week exactly how they're addressing that. So we'll talk about some unusual things related to qualifications and training when we do that next week. All right. I would like to say one last quick for any of you who have been listening and are still with us right now. Would you fly tonight if you could, if you weren't afraid of flying or anything like that, given what you've heard here today about the precautions that have been going on and what you can expect when you get there? So quick yes or no. I would fly. Yes, I would fly, or nope, still not going. And then the survey, which Dieter is going to put in the link to that, is one that we're replicating from before. We would, with all the changes in the COVID-19 out there that have taken place, particularly in states like Arizona, California, Texas, and Florida, we are curious to resurvey all of you and see how you may have shifted in attitude. And that's a little bit more in-depth question there. So, okay, any final questions, Dieter?
Well, first of all, Elaine, I agree with you. Seat pockets are scary and and are to be approached with caution. So and also, a lot of feedback. The seat pockets are like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. So, there you go.
Or what may get you.
Or what might get you, yeah. So, but I will say this. What I have kind of learned, not just what they're doing in Europe with planes and what they're doing up here in Canada with planes. Flying really has never been cleaner, and the procedures and the technology. There's a lot of innovation actually that's coming out of this, being in a bind, of having to ferry a lot of passengers in a very small space. And so that's kind of cool. And I want to thank, the people are saying I'm not flying until this is over. Still not flying. Nope. And then somebody said, yeah, but not to Arizona. So
yeah, no offense taken. Okay, so let's kind of close this up with a couple of things about aviation. The reason that aviation is the safest way to travel on the planet, commercial aviation, is because of the way that a couple of things. One is the technology is continually upgrading. One is human factors. We're continually learning more about how people function in a work group. But beyond that, beyond technology and the human factors, is the fact that when we have had accidents in the past, we investigate them with a diligence that would make CSI anybody anywhere on the TV shows look like a first day of elementary school, because we look at what happened and how to prevent it in the future. There's a thing called necessary infallibility. And what that refers to is it's a concept, theoretical concept, that when we have had accidents, particularly in aviation, what we learn out of that goes way beyond whatever the direct cause that caused that accident was. And we learn things that not only will prevent that accident from ever happening again, but it prevents a whole family of accidents of sometimes totally unrelated things. I mentioned when Sully, the Miracle on the Hudson, when he landed, there were 35 recommendations in that, and only about 5 of those were related directly to what happened there. They found 30 other areas of interest that they looked at that it had no bearing on that accident, but it caused them to look at that. And that's what happens when we have accidents. It's a great industry to be a part of, and I'm feel very fortunate that I did that. And I think you can see even tonight, just from what we've talked about, is the airline's response to the COVID-19 threat, which has some uniqueness to it. You'll see that nobody takes it lightly. So far be it from me to judge you for not flying or flying, whatever, but I would not let that be the main barrier to me flying. And that's just my opinion. And I'll keep it to myself. Last thing is Captain Eric. Okay. Captain Chop Liver. Nobody knows what the heck that means. So you got to tell everybody, what is chop liver? Why did you pick chop liver?
I'll put it back. I was free associating while you're gone. I was thinking, if Stephen King had not written a short, or has not yet written a short called The Seatback Pocket, I think I will. And everybody would know what he's talking about. And you just have the horror of the kind of out of focus thing right in front of the cover shaking. The seat back pocket has huge potential. Well, I should take that back off. I kind of put it up as a joke, but now that it's getting downstream, people won't recognize it. I retired when my whole fleet, the 757 and 767s, got parked. They were scheduled to get parked next year, and then they were scheduled to get parked later this summer. And as this stuff went on, the airline was able to make very rapid, vast changes that they wanted to do anyway to try and cut losses. And over the span of a week, they parked all of the airplanes. So they did that, and I only had a year and a half left, and had an option to take sort of a buyout or to go to school for a very long time and eat unpleasant food and be really sad. So I took the retirement, but I didn't really intend to do that. I call it a semi-involuntary retirement. So I started referring to myself as Captain Chop Liver. My friends call me Captain Liver. But I'll put my name back up there because at this point, you're right. Nobody knows it that.
Okay, and we want you to Google to see actually where it comes from, because obviously the context is feeling treated less than, and it comes from I have some in my own mind, but we'll find out exactly where the expression comes from. And that I was inspired today because I was listening to a podcast. I learned where Bluetooth came from, and Bluetooth is far more interesting, I think, than chopped liver. So we may talk about that next week as well. So anyway, tune in for another reason, find out the origins of the expression chopped liver and Bluetooth, because we will cover those next week, and a whole and much, much more, as we say. So come back next week. Thanks to Diane and Eric and Dieter and Paul and you all for watching. This is it for us tonight, and we'll be back next week for another episode of Chopped Liver. No, for another episode of Clear for Takeoff Live. So thanks, everybody. Have a great evening, and we really appreciate you showing up.
And in the words of Jim Duke, a former fearful flyer, it's not fear of flying that keeps him grounded. There are just no cruises to fly to.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, it'd probably be longer before the cruises come back than the flight. So anyway, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
good night, everybody.
Bye.